Long before the lines were drawn, before the flags were raised, and before the wars were fought, this land was one, a cradle of civilization where rivers carved empires and cultures flourished in harmony. But history, as it often does, took a turn. What was once united became divided, and the echoes of that rupture still resonate today. This is the story of India and Pakistan, a tale of shared ancestry, shattered unity, and a conflict that has shaped the destiny of millions. 5,000 years ago, along the fertile banks of the Indus River, one of humanity's first great civilizations thrived. The people of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro built cities with grid-like streets, advanced drainage systems, and a script we still struggle to decipher. They traded with Mesopotamia, worshipped gods of earth and water, and lived in a society that knew no borders, no India, no Pakistan, just people. But time is never kind to empires. Around 1500 BCE, waves of nomadic Aryans swept into the subcontinent, bringing with them new languages, new gods, and a new social order. The Vedas were composed, the caste system took root, and the cultural fabric of the land began to shift. Still, the land remained whole, a mosaic of tribes and kingdoms, but undivided. Centuries rolled on, and great empires rose and fell. The Mauryas unified much of the subcontinent under Ashoka the Great, a king who, after the horrors of war, turned to peace. His edicts preached tolerance, his envoys spread Buddhism far and wide. For a fleeting moment, it seemed this land could transcend its differences. But empires crumble, and unity is fragile. Then came the winds of change. From the northwest, Muslim conquerors rode in. First the Ghaznavids, then the Delhi Sultans, and finally the mighty Mughals. Babur, Akbar, Aurangzeb, they reshaped the land, blending Persian elegance with Indian tradition. Under their rule, the subcontinent became a dazzling fusion of cultures. Hindus and Muslims lived, fought, and thrived together. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. By the 18th century, the Mughal Empire was a shadow of itself. The British East India Company, once mere traders, now held the reins of power. And as colonial rule tightened its grip, something dangerous began to take hold. The idea that Hindus and Muslims were not just different, but irreconcilable. The British didn't create this divide, but they exploited it. The stage was set, the players were in place, and soon the partition would come. The year was 1757. A foreign power, cloaked in the guise of trade, had just won a decisive battle on the fields of Plassey. With that victory, the British East India Company didn't just claim Bengal, they laid the foundation for an empire that would reshape the subcontinent and plant the seeds of its eventual rupture. For nearly 2 centuries, the British ruled. They built railways, imposed laws, and drained wealth, but perhaps their most enduring legacy was the way they governed, by division. Divide et impera, divide and rule. It wasn't just a strategy, it was an obsession. They meticulously categorized Indians, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christian, not as people, but as statistics. Separate electorates were introduced, pitting community against community. Jobs, seats in legislatures, even military regiments were allotted by religion. The message was clear: you are not one people, you are rivals, and the people began to believe it. By the early 1900s, the Indian National Congress demanded freedom, but the British stoked fears among Muslims. What would happen to them in a Hindu-majority India? In 1906, the All India Muslim League was formed, not initially for partition, but for safeguards. Yet, the wedge had been driven deeper. 2 men emerged as titans of this struggle: Gandhi, the apostle of Hindu-Muslim unity, and Jinnah, once a Congress leader who grew disillusioned. By the 1940s, Jinnah's demand was no longer protection, it was a separate nation, Pakistan. The very word, an acronym: Punjab, Afghania, Kashmir, Sindh, and Balochistan. A dream or a threat? Then came the bloodshed. August 1946, the Muslim League called for direct action to demand Pakistan. In Calcutta, neighborhoods became battlegrounds. Hindus and Muslims, neighbors for generations, turned on each other. By the time the fires died, thousands lay dead. The British watched. The countdown to partition had begun, and then the British left. June 3rd, 1947, the last Viceroy of India, Lord Mountbatten, made the announcement that would echo through history. India would be free, but it would also be divided. Pakistan would be born. The line was drawn in secret by a man who had never set foot in the villages his pen would tear apart. Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a London barrister, was given 5 weeks to carve a nation in two. He knew nothing of India. He never met the people whose lives he he was cutting in half. And when the map was unveiled on August 17, 1947, 2 days after independence, no one was prepared for what came next. The greatest migration in human history had begun. Overnight, millions became strangers in their own land. Hindus and Sikhs fled west to India. Muslims fled east to Pakistan, but the roads between them ran red. They called it partition, a sterile word for what was really happening. Slaughter. Entire villages were wiped out. Women were kidnapped, children lost in the chaos. Trains arrived at stations silent, every passenger dead inside. The British had left, but the hatred they nurtured remained. No one knows how many died. 1 million? 2 million? The numbers blur, but the stories don't. The old man who still waits at Lahore station for a sister who never came. The woman who heard her baby cry as it was torn from her arms. The silent fields where laughter once grew. For a few fleeting months in 1947, hope still flickered. Gandhi, now an old man, walked through burning villages begging for peace. He fasted until Delhi's riots stopped, but the fire was too strong. On January 30th, 1948, a Hindu extremist shot him dead. The last apostle of unity was gone, and so the two nations began their life as enemies. October 1947. Just 2 months after independence, the First War began. Not in the plains of Punjab, not in the halls of Delhi or Karachi, but here, in the mist-shrouded valleys of Kashmir, a land so beautiful, it was said God himself vacationed here. Now, it would become hell on earth. The Maharaja of Kashmir, a Hindu ruler over a Muslim-majority kingdom, hesitated too long. Tribal militias, armed, some say, by Pakistan, poured across the border. Entire villages burned. In desperation, he signed away his kingdom to India in exchange for military aid. The ink was barely dry when Indian troops airlifted into Srinagar. Pakistan called it betrayal. India called it salvation. Kashmirists called it the beginning of their nightmare. The First Indo-Pak War raged for over a year. When the guns finally fell silent in 1949, the ceasefire line looked like a jagged scar across the map. Kashmir was split. India controlled the valleys, Pakistan the mountains, but this wasn't peace. It was a pause. They fought again in 1965. This time, not over ambiguity, but pride. Pakistan launched Operation Gibraltar, infiltrating Kashmir to spark rebellion. India struck back hard. For 17 days, the two young nations tested each other's will. Entire villages vanished under artillery barrages. When the UN forced a ceasefire, both sides claimed victory, but the only real winners were the vultures. War has a way of burying itself, but never deep enough. Then came the reckoning. In 1971, Pakistan tore itself apart. East Pakistan, separated by 1,000 miles of Indian territory, demanded independence. The army's brutal crackdown sent 10 million refugees flooding into India. This time, India didn't just intervene, it broke Pakistan in half. In just 13 days, Bangladesh was born. 93,000 Pakistani soldiers surrendered, the largest capitulation since World War II. Pakistan's humiliation was complete. But in the ashes of defeat, something darker took root. The unshakable belief that India could never be trusted, that Kashmir must never be lost, that the next war would be different, and so they built a weapon. May 11th, 1998, India awakened a sleeping god. In the Rajasthan desert, beneath the feet of unsuspecting camels, scientists detonated Shakti-1, a thermonuclear bomb powerful enough to erase history itself. The world gasped, but 800 kilometers west, in Pakistan's Chagai Hills, men were already whispering, "Now we must wake ours." 17 days later, Pakistan answered. 6 nuclear tests in a single day. The mountains trembled, the uranium cores, some say stolen from Libya, others whisper from China, had fulfilled their destiny. The subcontinent was no longer just at war. It was balancing on the edge of annihilation. The world would see how quickly the unthinkable could happen. Summer 1999. Pakistani soldiers in disguise seized the peaks of Kargil, high ground that overlooked India's vital highway. For the first time in history, 2 nuclear powers fought directly. Indian MiGs streaked through missile engagement zones. Pakistani artillery shells fell near nuclear storage bunkers. In Washington and Moscow, panic buttons hovered under sweating palms. The war ended with Pakistan's withdrawal, but the message was clear. Next time, there would be no withdrawal, only the end. Then came the true test. December 2001, terrorists attacked India's parliament. Within weeks, both nations mobilized 1 million soldiers, the largest military military buildup since World War II. For 6 months, the world watched as nuclear convoys moved under cover of darkness. American spy satellites detected missing warheads. Hospitals stockpiled potassium iodide tablets. The doomsday clock ticked to 2 minutes to midnight. What stopped the unthinkable? Some say American diplomacy. Others believe it was the simple, terrible mathematics of mutual destruction. That in the end, even hatred has limits. Today, the missiles still point at each other. The warheads, smaller, smarter, deadlier, wait in their vaults. Every year, new tunnels are dug beneath glaciers. Every month, another test. The world has moved on, but here, the clock never reset, and so we wait for the next crisis, the next spark, the last mistake. There is another story of India and Pakistan, one not written in treaties or carved on war memorials, but whispered in the shared rhythm of heartbeats. It lives where a Delhi grandmother still cooks her sister's Lahore-style kheer recipe, where a Karachi taxi driver hums a Lata Mangeshkar song his grandfather taught him, where the border vanishes every time a monsoon cloud bursts over Punjab. On both sides of the line, they told us we were enemies, but the earth remembers otherwise. When the 2005 earthquake shattered Kashmir, villagers ran across the line of control to dig survivors from rubble. No passports, no questions. Indian and Pakistani surgeons worked side by side in field hospitals, their hands stained with the same blood. The poets never recognized the border. Faiz Ahmed Faiz is still recited in Indian college halls. Ghalib's verses grace Karachi's wedding invitations. When Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's voice swells from an auto rickshaw in Mumbai, no one asks which nation owned his soul. Every night at Wagah, soldiers stage their theatrical rage for the crowds. But veterans know the truth, how those same men secretly exchange cigarettes in the foggy mornings, how an Indian major once carried his Pakistani counterpart's daughter to an ambulance during a medical emergency, how the very officers trained to kill each other still share the same childhood memories of monsoon rains and mango orchards. The young refuse, the old hatreds. Pakistani drama serials stream illegally in Indian bedrooms. Indian TikTok trends go viral in Lahore basements. When a cricket match is played, half the memes mocking both teams come from the enemy's side. 76 years later, the wounds still bleed, but the surgeons are working, not in presidential palaces or UN chambers, but in college canteens where exchange students tentatively confess how alike their mother's voices sound. In the illegal SIM cards smuggled across borders so a granddaughter can hear her ancestral language spoken properly. In the quiet defiance of loving a place that no longer exists on any map, they drew the line in ink, but hearts write their own geography. If you followed this journey from ancient rivers to nuclear silos to these fragile human connections, consider subscribing to The Past Unfolded, because history isn't just about wars and kings. It's about the whispers that survive them. Click the bell so you won't miss our next exploration of humanity's deepest memories. But more importantly, wherever you are, whoever you love across any border, keep listening for those whispers.